Welcome back. The new White House Chief of Staff, John Kelly, did not waste any time yesterday asserting himself in his new role. Kelly is the latest in a long line of White House Chiefs of Staff brought in by presidents to right the ship in tumultuous times. Almost exactly 23 years ago, another president, Bill Clinton, made one of those moves, bringing in his budget director, Panetta, to serve as Chief of Staff to calm a jittery Capitol Hill and a jittery party and a jittery White House staff. Presidents Clinton and Trump were in similar positions in the polls when they had to make their first Chief of Staff switch. Both were around 40% in the Gallup National Poll. I'm joined now by Bill Clinton's former White House Chief of Staff and the second one of his presidency. Of course, he went on to have many other titles, including CIA Director and Secretary of Defense. Mr. Panetta, I don't even know what to say. The Honorable, which title to use today, but I need the Chief title today, sir.
It's whichever one you want to use, Chuck. Normally it's Secretary Panetta at this point.
You will love this lead. This was in the New York Times the day you started. The announcement came at a time in which Mr. Clinton is being strongly buffeted by political cross-currents at home and abroad. His standing with the public has not substantially improved since his '92 election with 43% of the vote. His health reform is being picked apart in Congress, and he's increasingly being accused of indecisiveness in foreign affairs. So you do know what John Kelly is going through. Obviously, there are some differences between perhaps the public discipline of Donald Trump and the public discipline of Bill Clinton, but let's focus on the similarities. Explain what you think John Kelly's going through right now that you remember.
Well, I think the big challenge is to walk into the White House and really be able to get your arms around the operations within the White House. It's really critical that he establish relationships first and foremost, obviously, with the president. There has to be a relationship of trust between the president and the Chief of Staff. In addition to that, he's got to be able to establish a relationship with the staff that's there and make them understand that he is going to be Chief of Staff and that they're going to have to go through him. So I think the real challenge for John right now is to be able to put in place elements of discipline, a strong chain of command, the ability to develop some kind of orderly process of developing policy. Those are kind of the big challenges that he faces from the get-go.
Now, you had to create a personal rapport with Bill Clinton that wasn't there at the beginning, because he was you were a Washington and California guy, less an Arkansas Democrat. How do you and you're brought in to fix things. So on one hand, you have a honeymoon period. How much advice do you give to John Kelly? Say, if you've got tough decisions to make as many of them as you can in the first couple of weeks. How do you get yourself in a mode to identify it, to basically take advantage of your honeymoon period with your boss?
It's very important that, first and foremost, that John Kelly and the president kind of understand each other and what needs to be done, and that the president is willing to delegate that authority to his new Chief of Staff. That has to take place. Bill Clinton understood the problems that were in the White House. He was willing to delegate authority to me as Chief of Staff to be able to reorganize the White House and develop the kind of chain of command that was important there. And so the most important ingredient is to have a president who's willing not only to give you the authority you need, but is willing to back you up and to trust you in that process. That's going to be fundamental to John Kelly's ability to be able to get his job done.
Now, you don't just have a unique insight on the job. You know John Kelly very well. He was your, correct me if I'm wrong, I believe he was one of your chief military aides during part of your tenure at the Pentagon. What's a skill set that he has that you wish you had going into being Chief of Staff?
Well, I do know John. He was my military aide when I was Secretary of the Department of Defense. He's a tough Marine. He understands what discipline is all about. He understands what a strong chain of command is all about. He understands what an orderly process is all about. He understands that you have to stay focused on accomplishing the mission. Those are all important ingredients that go to his experience as a Marine, and those are good qualities. I think the important thing he's going to have to pick up on is the politics of operating within the White House. The politics of understanding where the staff is, what the relationships are, and also the politics of dealing with Capitol Hill. Because in the end, if this president is going to survive, it isn't enough just to change your chief of staff. You've got to be able to get some things done for the country. And the chief of staff is going to be very important to whether or not that happens.
Before I let you go, there's two developments on the international front that I want to get your take on. Secretary Tillerson made sort of the most remarks he's made yet about North Korea, and he said the following in a briefing to reporters. He said he wants a dialogue with North Korea, that he doesn't want regime change, and he said we are not the enemy, but they are threatening us. He's not asking for reunification of the peninsula. He does not want to move our military above the 38th parallel, but we'll have to take some actions. I mean, he's trying to send a message here that they want to talk, negotiate. It seemed to be a contradiction of where we were headed before. Frankly, I am confused about what is our policy when it comes to North Korea and that leadership.
Well, that's the first thing that I think the administration has to focus on. Is one of the things that John Kelly and General McMaster are going to have to focus on is what is the strategy here? Obviously, there has to be containment. Obviously, we have to be tough in terms of our military presence. Obviously, we have to be tough in terms of making clear that the North Koreans cannot develop an intercontinental ballistic missile that could threaten our country. And we have to take strong steps to deal with that. But at the same time, we've got to reach out diplomatically to try to see whether there is an opportunity to engage in negotiations. But it's going to take both efforts. You need a strong military effort. You need a strong diplomatic effort if there's going to be any hope of dealing with North Korea.
And then finally, there's been some reports. There was a Washington Post report, and no final decision has been made, but that the Department of State is thinking about editing the mission statement that would eliminate any mention of promoting democracy and essentially promoting democratic values around the world. Are you concerned about that? I mean, some could argue that, hey, American foreign policy got to be more pragmatic, more realistic, and so, you know, take that out of the mission. What say you?
America's diplomacy in the world has been based on our values. And our principal value is our respect for our democracy, our freedoms, and our ability to be able to engage in self-government. Those are the critical features of what makes us a strong country in the world, what makes us a world leader. If we eliminate reference to democracy, if we eliminate reference to the basic freedoms and liberties that are critical, not only for our country, but for the rest of the world, then I think it undermines our ability to exert world leadership. It makes us weaker.
So you would advise Secretary Tillerson, don't make any changes to this?
Don't mess with that. You don't need to mess with that. What you need to do is to get more diplomats in the State Department to do the job that you have to do, which is to reach out to the world and engage in diplomatic relationships that can help our country provide security to the world.
Secretary Panetta, I always wish we had more time with you, but I appreciate you coming on and sharing your views, sir.